Olivia's sneakers scuffed the pavement as she walked home, her school bag slung over one shoulder and headphones snugly covering her ears. 16 and fiercely determined, she rapped quietly under her breath, her own lyrics blending with the beats of her favorite P Diddy track. The world around her blurred into irrelevance, just the faint rustle of leaves in the afternoon breeze and the steady rhythm of her thoughts punctuated by the bass line pulsing in her ears. Music didn't just run through her, it consumed her, shaped her, and pulled her toward a future she could almost touch. P Diddy's poster adorned her bedroom wall, and his iconic image was a daily reminder of the artist she aspired to be. Olivia's admiration for him was more than fan worship, it was a connection to the kind of success and charisma she dreamed of achieving. He was the blueprint, the living embodiment of what she envisioned for herself, a voice that broke barriers, a figure who commanded stages and shaped culture. Every track she wrote, every verse she rehearsed in the solitude of her room, carried echoes of his influence. Her days were an intricate balancing act. Between school assignments, the occasional part-time shifts her family urged her to take, and late-night sessions scribbling lyrics in the margins of her notebooks, Olivia carried the weight of her ambitions like an unspoken secret. It wasn't easy. Her parents, supportive but practical, frequently reminded her of the fragility of her dreams. Giving up wasn't an option. Not when she could feel the rhythm of a beat calling her every moment of every day. At that day, as the school ended and she began the familiar walk home, the excitement bubbling in her chest refused to be ignored. She had a song idea brewing, one she could already picture lighting up a crowd. Her notebook tucked inside her bag carried the beginnings of it, just scattered phrases and fragments, but they felt electric. Each step she took along the sidewalk became part of the rhythm in her head. She imagined the words pouring out of her over a mic, imagined the audience leaning in to hear her story. One day, it would happen. She didn't just believe it, she needed it. She adjusted the strap of her bag as she turned a corner, the soft glow of the sun dipping behind the rows of houses. It painted the sky in streaks of orange and pink, but Olivia barely noticed. Her mind wandered to the dreams she replayed endlessly, stepping onto a stage, the roar of the crowd, the flash of lights. She smiled faintly, mouthing the lines to a verse she was trying to perfect. Her voice, low and deliberate, matched the imagined beat thumping in her head. But dreams, she'd learned, didn't often follow a straight path. The uneven sidewalk stretched ahead of her, cracked in places by years of wear, and Olivia's foot caught an unexpected rise in the pavement. Her body pitched forward suddenly, her balance faltering as her bag slipped from her shoulder. The impact came before she could fully register the fall. Her head struck the hard surface with a sickening thud, and for a moment, there was nothing but the stark chill of the pavement against her cheek. The world seemed to tilt, her vision swimming with bursts of light that danced in the corners of her eyes. The muffled sounds of distant footsteps and murmurs of concern faded into the background as the edges of her consciousness began to blur. Olivia tried to move, to push herself up, but her limbs felt heavy and disconnected. Her heartbeat pulsed loudly in her ears, drowning out every other sound. The faint hum of a car engine in the distance and the concerned murmur of strangers drawing nearer were the last fragments of reality she could register before everything around her dissolved into blackness. The pavement beneath her seemed to vanish, and a strange, almost tranquil silence filled the void. As her consciousness faded further, Olivia felt an inexplicable pull, as though she were being drawn into a tunnel, its edges swirling with a faint, golden light. Was this the end of her dreams, or the beginning of something far more unexpected? Olivia drifted through the blackness. Her senses dulled and distant as if the world she had known had folded into itself and left her suspended in an unending void. There were no sounds, no edges to grasp, only the sensation of movement, though her body felt strangely absent. It was a space where time seemed irrelevant, an infinite stretch where seconds and hours dissolved into the same weightless expanse. Gradually, a dim light began to bloom in the distance. At first, it was faint, a soft golden flicker against the suffocating darkness, but with each passing moment, it grew brighter, pulling her toward it. Olivia didn't walk, she wasn't sure she even moved. The light called her, its glow threading through the silence, and though she couldn't feel her body, her spirit surged forward, drawn by something she couldn't explain. The tunnel appeared as the light expanded, its walls swirling with a strange, fluid motion. It felt alive, pulsating gently as though breathing, and the air around her carried an otherworldly stillness. Olivia wanted to speak, to call out, but her voice seemed caught in her chest, unformed and muted. She moved closer, the golden glow at the end of the tunnel intensifying, and a sense of awe began to swell inside her. The light wasn't blinding, it was warm and inviting, its radiance seeping into her soul with a strange familiarity that both soothed and unsettled her. As she emerged from the tunnel, the expanse around her shifted into an endless golden field, its brilliance stretching in all directions. The ground beneath her didn't feel solid, yet she wasn't falling. It supported her like an invisible force, holding her steady in this vast, ethereal realm. The air shimmered, and the faint hum of a melody, soft and haunting, wrapped itself around her like a whisper she couldn't quite decipher. A figure began to take shape within the golden glow, emerging slowly, its form fluid and radiant. It wasn't entirely human nor completely abstract, but a being of light whose presence filled the space with an undeniable authority. Olivia could feel its gaze, though it had no visible eyes, and the weight of its attention settled over her like a blanket of both comfort and gravity. It moved closer, its aura calming yet impossible to ignore. "Olivia," the being spoke, its voice resonating not through the air but directly within her mind. The tone was neither male nor female, but its calm cadence carried a wisdom that felt ancient and vast. "You have been brought here for a reason." Olivia wanted to respond, to ask where she was and why this was happening, but the words refused to form. The being seemed to sense her unspoken questions and continued, its light pulsing gently with each word. "You stand at a threshold, caught between the world you know and the truth you need to see." The space around them shifted, the golden light dimming slightly as images began to ripple in the air. Scenes played out like a silent film, their clarity sharp and vivid. Olivia watched as faces she recognized filled the space, icons of the music industry, celebrated figures she had admired for years. Among them was P Diddy, his confident smile and larger-than-life presence as magnetic as ever. But the images twisted, their tone darkening as shadows crept into the edges. Olivia saw flashes of opulent parties that felt strangely sinister, moments of power and influence steeped in an undercurrent of something deeply unsettling. The being's voice accompanied the visions, its calm unwavering. "What you see is the truth behind the facade. Fame and power are rarely untainted, and those who rise too high often do so at great cost." The images grew sharper, focusing on P Diddy. Olivia's stomach tightened as she saw scenes that contradicted everything she had believed about him. The charm and charisma she had idolized now seemed like a mask, concealing something far darker. She saw rituals cloaked in secrecy, moments of control over young artists whose dreams were twisted into tools for manipulation. The shadows around him deepened, revealing a side of the industry she had never imagined. "This cannot be real," Olivia finally managed to whisper, her voice trembling with disbelief. He's not like this. He's a legend. He's inspired me." Her words felt fragile, breaking apart as she spoke them. The being's light dimmed slightly, its tone tinged with an almost mournful weight. "What you see is not a reflection of talent but of choices. He is bound by forces he no longer controls, and his actions serve an agenda far beyond himself. The music you love carries truths and lies intertwined." Olivia's heart raced as she tried to process the revelations unraveling before her. The image of her idol, once shining and untouchable, now felt fractured, a mosaic of light and darkness she could barely comprehend. The being moved closer, its radiance enveloping her in a protective warmth. You have been shown this for a purpose. The world is filled with illusions, but it is your choice to seek the truth. Integrity and authenticity are rare, yet they are the only paths to lasting peace. The golden light began to pulse again, and Olivia felt the field around her shifting once more, the images fading into the ether. The weight of the being's words settled deep within her, mingling with her disbelief and sorrow. How could the world she had idolized harbor such darkness? How could she reconcile the dreams she carried with the truths she now knew? The being's final words echoed softly as the golden light began to fade. The choice will not be easy, but it is yours. Will you use what you've seen to forge a better path, or will you remain in the shadows? As the light around her dimmed and the tunnel began to draw her back, Olivia's mind swirled with questions. Could she accept the truth she had been shown, or would its weight prove too much to bear? The sterile hum of fluorescent lights flickered dimly above Olivia as her eyelids fluttered open, heavy and reluctant. The world around her swam in muted tones of white and gray, the edges of the room seeming to waver like an unfinished painting. A sharp beeping filled her ears, each sound steady and rhythmic, yet strangely invasive as if punctuating her disorientation. Her chest ached with a dull, suffocating weight, and every breath felt like a laborious climb from a deep, endless well. Olivia. The voice was soft and trembling, layered with both hope and fear. Turning her head slightly, Olivia's eyes met her mother's tear-streaked face, her usually composed expression now crumbling into raw emotion. Beside her, Olivia's father sat with his hands clasped tightly together as if the act of holding on to something could keep the world steady. Olivia blinked slowly, her mind sluggish and fractured. The room felt too bright, too loud. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry, and the effort brought only a faint croak. Her mother leaned forward, pressing a cool hand to Olivia's forehead. "Don't try to talk yet. You've been through so much." Through the haze of her thoughts, fragments of her last moments before waking began to surface. She remembered the fall, the cold pavement against her skin, the sharp pain before everything had gone dark. And then, the tunnel. The light. The figure. And the revelations. The weight of what she had seen crashed into her like a wave, scattering her fragile sense of calm. "How long?" Olivia managed, her voice raspy and weak, though the question hung unfinished. Her father cleared his throat, his expression tight with emotion. 9 minutes, he said softly, the words measured and deliberate. You were gone for 9 minutes. The doctor said there was nothing they could do, but then, you came back. 9 minutes. The number echoed in her mind, carrying with it a chilling finality. She had been dead, not just unconscious or dreaming. For 9 whole minutes, her life had ceased, and yet here she was, lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by faces etched with worry. But she wasn't entirely back, not really. Pieces of her felt disconnected, untethered, as though part of her had remained in that golden realm. Her parents' voices blended with the sound of the monitors, their reassurances and cautious optimism washing over her without fully sinking in. Olivia's mind was somewhere else, piecing together the images from the tunnel, the figure's words, and the revelations about the music industry. It felt too real to dismiss, too vivid to write off as a figment of her imagination. The warmth of the light, the weight of the warnings, these weren't things her mind could have conjured from nothing. Her chest tightened as she thought of P Diddy, the idol whose music had once been her anchor, her guide through the chaos of adolescence. The figure's words about his connection to dark rituals and the exploitation of young artists played in her mind like a haunting refrain. She had spent years idolizing him, building her dreams on the foundation of his success, only to have that foundation crack beneath the weight of what she now knew. How could someone she admired so deeply hide such darkness? A chill crept over her, not from the hospital room but from within, an unease that took root in her chest and refused to leave. The figure's warnings echoed louder now, the words wrapping around her like a vice. This wasn't just a dream, nor could it be dismissed as an illusion conjured by trauma. It felt like a message, a truth meant to shake her from the comfort of her beliefs. The realization brought with it a deep sense of loss. Olivia wasn't mourning a person but the image of someone who had inspired her. The dreams tied to that image were now tainted with doubt. Yet even in the confusion and fear, there was a spark of something more, a determination. If the figure had shown her this truth, it wasn't without purpose. There had to be a reason for it, a reason why she had been chosen to see beyond the surface. Left alone as night fell over the hospital, Olivia's mind refused to quiet. The room felt suffocating, the shadows stretching long across the walls, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every sound seemed amplified, every flicker of movement in the corner of her vision enough to make her heart race. She closed her eyes, trying to calm the storm of thoughts swirling inside her. The figure's final words repeated themselves in her mind, steady and deliberate. Authenticity. Integrity. These were the choices she had to make now. But how could she move forward, knowing what she knew? How could she face a world she now understood to be darker than she'd ever imagined? The days following Olivia's discharge from the hospital unraveled in a haze of unease. The sterile scent of disinfectant and the steady hum of machines still presented in her mind, but it was the memories of her near-death experience that clung to her most tightly. They refused to fade, intruding on every quiet moment and creeping into her dreams. At night, she found herself jolted awake, heart pounding, as visions of the golden figure and the shadowy warnings replayed with unnerving clarity. Her once familiar surroundings felt different now, foreign and unwelcoming. The air in her bedroom seemed colder, her footsteps echoed strangely in the stillness of her house, and the shadows in the corners of her vision felt alive. Olivia told herself it was paranoia, her mind trying to make sense of everything she had experienced. Yet the feeling of being watched never fully disappeared. At first, the strange occurrences were small enough to dismiss, a door creaking open without reason, a faint whisper that seemed to rise from nowhere, a sudden chill that swept through her despite the summer heat. But the dreams were worse. They came every night, vivid and suffocating. She would find herself back in the golden light, the warmth of the figure's presence now tinged with an ominous undertone. And always, in the far edges of her vision, the shadow of the man in the suit loomed, silent and unmoving, as if waiting for her to make a mistake. One afternoon, desperate for some sense of normalcy, Olivia called her closest friend, Mia. They had been inseparable since middle school, bonded by their shared love of music and their endless dreams of making it big. If there was anyone who would understand, or at least listen, it was Mia. Sitting across from Mia in their favorite cafe, Olivia struggled to find the right words. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice quieter than she intended. Mia leaned forward, concern flashing across her face. "What is it? Are you okay?" Olivia hesitated, then nodded, though it felt like a lie. "I mean, I'm alive, right? But something happened to me when I was in the hospital. It wasn't just an accident, Mia. I saw things." Mia frowned, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean, saw things? Like, hallucinations?" "No," Olivia said quickly, her voice firm. "It wasn't like that. It felt real. I was somewhere else, a place I can't even describe. And there was this figure, this being of light. It showed me things. Things about the music industry. About P Diddy." She paused, the weight of the name lingering in the air between them. Mia blinked, confusion clouding her expression. "P Diddy? What are you talking about? What kind of things?" Olivia took a deep breath and recounted what she had seen, the rituals, the manipulation, the darkness hidden behind the surface of fame. The words spilled out in a rush, each one feeling heavier than the last. When she finished, she looked at Mia, searching for understanding. Mia sat back, her arms crossed. Live, I don't know. That sounds, she trailed off, searching for the right word. I mean, it sounds intense. Are you sure it wasn't just, your brain making things up after the accident? Olivia's stomach sank. She had expected skepticism, but hearing it aloud still stung. I know how it sounds, she said softly. But it wasn't just a dream, Mia. It was more than that. I can feel it, even now. Like it's following me. Following you? Mia asked, her voice dipping into unease. What do you mean? I don't know, Olivia admitted, her voice trembling. It's like I feel watched, like there's something out there that doesn't want me to talk about this. Weird things have been happening, doors opening on their own, shadows that move when there's no one there. And the dreams, they're so vivid. It's him, Mia. The man in the suit. He's always there. Mia shifted uncomfortably, glancing around the cafe as if expecting someone to overhear. Liv, this is a lot. Maybe you just need to talk to someone, like a professional, to help make sense of it. Olivia looked away, swallowing the lump in her throat. She wanted to argue, to make Mia see that this wasn't just a manifestation of trauma. But the words refused to come. That night, as Olivia sat in her room, the unease grew heavier. The house was quiet, her parents asleep, but every creak of the floorboard sent a chill down her spine. She tried to focus on her notebook, scribbling lyrics in a futile attempt to distract herself, but her hand trembled too much to write. Then it happened. The faint sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway, slow and deliberate. Olivia froze, her breath catching in her throat. She turned toward the door, but it remained closed. Her heart pounded as the air grew colder, the shadows in the corners of the room stretching unnaturally. A soft whisper, barely audible, drifted through the room. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was chilling, like a warning wrapped in malice. Olivia clutched the edge of her desk, her knuckles white as the temperature seemed to plummet. The silence that followed felt louder than any noise. Olivia's mind raced. Was it her imagination, or was the darkness truly creeping closer? Could she continue to carry this burden, or would it consume her entirely? The morning light filtered through Olivia's window, warm and golden, cutting through the heavy weight of the previous night's fears. She sat at her desk, her notebook open, the pages scattered with half-finished lyrics and hastily scribbled ideas. The pen in her hand trembled slightly, but her grip steadied as determination replaced the lingering unease. She couldn't allow herself to be consumed by the shadows, she had to fight back, not with fear, but with purpose. The events of her near-death experience had left a permanent mark on her, reshaping her view of the world she once idolized. She could no longer ignore the truths she had seen, the darkness that lurked behind the bright lights of fame. But she also couldn't let those truths define her. If anything, they fueled a fire inside her, a fire that demanded she use her voice not to chase the empty promises of fame but to speak with authenticity and inspire others to do the same. She leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting to the poster of P Diddy on her wall. For years, it had been her symbol of hope, a reminder that dreams could become reality. Now, it felt like a hollow shell, a mask hiding a darker reality. Olivia stood and walked over to the poster, her fingers brushing over its glossy surface. The image no longer held the power it once did. It wasn't a symbol of what she wanted to become, it was a reminder of what she needed to change. With a quiet resolve, she pulled the poster down, folding it carefully and setting it aside. She didn't tear it or destroy it, it wasn't about anger or rejection. It was about moving forward, about building something new. Olivia returned to her desk, the blank page in her notebook calling to her. Her pen hovered over it for a moment before she began to write. The words flowed easily, raw and unfiltered, each line a reflection of her journey. She wrote about the lure of fame, the weight of illusions, and the importance of staying true to oneself. The lyrics took shape, weaving a story of resilience and hope, a declaration of her commitment to creating music that mattered. The melody came next, simple and haunting, building to a powerful crescendo. Olivia hummed softly as she worked, her voice growing stronger with each note. The music wasn't just for her, it was for everyone who had ever felt silenced, for every artist who had been manipulated, for every dreamer who had been told to compromise. It was a call to rise above the noise, to seek truth in a world consumed by greed and deceit. As the day turned to evening, Olivia's determination only grew. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The industry she loved was riddled with challenges, and the shadows that had haunted her weren't gone. But she was no longer afraid of them. If anything, they had given her clarity. She understood now that her voice wasn't just a tool for personal success, it was a weapon for change. She imagined herself on stage, not as a reflection of someone else's vision but as her own, unfiltered self. The thought made her smile, a small but genuine curve of her lips that carried with it a newfound strength. Her music wouldn't chase fame, it would chase the truth. And through that truth, she would build something far greater than any chart-topping hit. As Olivia finished the final verse of her song, she set her pen down and leaned back, listening to the silence of her room. For the first time in days, the silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt calm and purposeful, as though the room itself had taken a deep breath. But in the quiet, a lingering question tugged at the edge of her thoughts. The shadows hadn't disappeared, and the man in the suit still haunted her dreams. Were they truly gone, or were they waiting for the right moment to return? Would her decision to step into the light draw them closer, or would it finally set her free? Olivia didn't know the answers, but for now, she embraced the uncertainty. She would face whatever came next with the same determination that had brought her back to life. Her journey was only beginning, and her music would carry her forward, shining a light in even the darkest of places.